Welcome back. WhatsApp hacked. A vulnerability in the app allows spyware to be installed on phones that can turn on the camera, microphone, and collect data. WhatsApp releasing an update to protect against spyware. Joining us right now is the Herbold Group Managing Director and former Microsoft Chief Operating Officer, Bob Herbold. Bob, it's great to have you on the program this morning. Thanks so much for being here.
Hi, Maria.
Every day there's another hack. Every day there's another issue where there's a breach in our privacy. How do you see things changing? I mean, something's got to give here, right?
Well, the problem, Maria, is the difficulty of putting software together. The public doesn't realize it, but a piece of software is a giant decision tree. And what the programmer has to anticipate is all possibilities coming at them. And what happens in building software is you have gaps, you have flaws in logic as they attempt to piece all these things together. And you end up with software that has a few vulnerabilities. And in fact, most software probably does, believe it or not. And so the hackers specialize in combing through all of this code and finding those availabilities, shall we say, for them to insert things. And that's what we have in this case.
Yeah, you know, the sad thing is here, and this is some related, is that most states now have a one-party consent law to recordings. And so what used to be a felony where both parties had to consent no longer is a crime. So the investigative response to something like this should be criminal. And unfortunately, it's not deemed as much of it's an invasion of privacy, but not necessarily criminal conduct. Like in New York City, it's not criminal conduct.
Yeah. Can I ask Bob a quick question? Hey, Bob, this is Arthur Brooks here from AEI. Good
Hi,
to see
Arthur.
you. A question for you about this. You know, do you think that these data breaches are inevitable, just kind of a cost of doing business, or do you think that companies are not doing enough and we should be holding them more accountable than we are so we could have a higher standard? It sort of seems to me sometimes like a lot of these newer industries are not held to the same level of account that we would, say, I don't know, Boeing, something along those lines. What's your view on that?
I think that most companies are fully aware of the difficulty of putting together a great piece of software. And they spend an enormous amount of time looking for bugs. And huge teams of people at a company such as Microsoft, where I was, had exactly that task, to constantly be on the lookout for where are the vulnerabilities in this code. And they would find them, patch them, and that's why you see an update regularly these days from software companies trying to patch these things in order to anticipate problems that they think they have detected. So it's a difficult task to put together a so-called flawless piece of software.
So there are dual op-eds this morning on Facebook in the New York Times, one from Facebook's co-founder, Chris Hughes, last week saying it's time to break up the technology giant. And there's a response from Facebook saying that that's not the answer. From a vice presidential candidate, Joe Biden, also weighed in. He says he's open to breaking up Facebook. Bob, is that where this is going? Do you think we'll see a breakup of Facebook and other large social media companies?
Well, I think that's an easy thing for a politician to say, to be quite honest. But if you were to spin off WhatsApp and Instagram and the like, you still have the core problems with Facebook and social media in general. And that is the privacy issue. People don't know that they're turning over all of that information. And secondly, fake news. These tools, basically, you can record any lie you want and assume that the public will believe it's true, and there it goes. And all of a sudden, you've got all these stories emerging in the media based on facts that are simply not sound. And consequently, those are the core problems, privacy and fake news, and they better deal with those. Breaking up these companies simply avoids, coming to grips with those very core problems.
Bob, we're going to get the import-export data in a minute, so I'll turn to those numbers as soon as I get them. We want to look at them because of China. But I also want to ask you about China, because you are a former official of Microsoft, and I was told 90% of the companies in China use the Microsoft operating system, but only 1% pay for them. Steve Ballmer, as I think I mentioned to you before, your former colleague, former CEO of Microsoft, said that it costs the company $10 billion a year in profits. Can you characterize China's theft of Microsoft?
Well, you know, I think Steve is correct. We were constantly after the Chinese to understand the value of software. I think they've made progress, but the fact is it's in their genes. That's, you know, basically the cost of doing business in China, the realization that these people don't have the same values as we do, and we constantly work on that. So things have improved a bit, but frankly, it's still a huge problem, and that's why you see the big flap over it today.
So we're getting the import prices up 0.2% for the month of April, and export prices are also up 0.2%. This is much lower than what the estimates were on imports and exports. What should President Trump be doing, knowing what you know as a businessman, and you were the victim of theft from China to Microsoft? What should President Trump be doing about this flap between the U.S. and China? Because it goes well beyond trade. This is about IP theft, and it's about the military as well.
I think the whole group, working from a U.S. perspective, should stop talking about this a lot more than they have been. They've been talking too much. The Chinese don't want to lose face here. And so consequently, these discussions need to be much more private than they have been, because this is a tough pill for the Chinese to swallow. And in fact, we're asking them to change laws and the like, and those are difficult things. So they have a big pill to swallow, and we need to make it easier for them.
But the cat's out of the bag in terms of theft at this point.
No doubt.
Yeah. Bob, great to have you. Thanks so much. Bob Herbold joining us there.